to sparkling something.
Woo!
There we go.
Oh, there we do go.
That wasn't quite as satisfying as
it was still extremely crisp. You'd never know that it was seltzer. And seltzer is fabulous, by the way. Chris, tell me what flavor that is.
Well, look, let's see. It's there's sparkling water. A real squeezed fruit. What? I don't know what the heck that even is. Oh, and real
squeezed fruit.
Yep, that's it. It says. Yep. So it's like lemon, raspberry lime. Raspberry lime.
Raspberry lime. Oh, that's gorgeous. Chris, I need to get me some of that.
Very refreshing.
It looks refreshing. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's what I need.
It's Sober October is what we were discussing earlier. That's right.
Sober October.
That's right.
Chris, I love this. Okay, I'm very excited. So Chris is going to be sharing with us some non-alcoholic beverages this October, and we are pumped about that. And did you just see this beautiful seltzer we have here? Listen, we need to be sponsored by the seltzer now. Beautiful, beautiful.
Looks Look like how big it is. It's as big as my head. It's gigantic. It's almost as big as Jess's.
I love it. Oh, look at this. 1.5 years sober here, says Marla. Tino, you go, guys. Thank you. Okay. I'm not exactly. I have been having so far not a very sober October, but I would love to try this. It would be good for my health. Not that a beverage is a bad thing, but I think it's always a good thing to do, especially as part of any like detox or like a good little health program that's going on.
There was no out of control kind of situation. I was reading about it was in the New Yorker about non-alcoholic beers and all kinds of things. And the guy said the beers from a local brewery here in Connecticut, as a matter of fact, Athletic Brewing Company, were actually quite tasty. So I said, and he also mentioned people doing Sober October. So I said, I love it. I'm going to check this out. And it tasted pretty good. And I said, that's it. I'm doing Sober October and I'm just going to go for it.
Chris, I think that is fabulous. And you know what? Maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it along with you starting after today. Because I do have a glass of wine right here. Cheers.
Cheers.
But I really do love that idea, and that would be really good for me for a few reasons, I think. But anyways, it is October.
That's right. In November, I'm gonna stop doing meth, and then
Chris.
What?
Well, I guess then I better stop doing. Yeah.
I know you're a crack girl. I know you are.
Oh, Mom says wait until after your birthday. Yeah, definitely. We're going to be having kavas. We need kava.
Now, hold on a second. When is your birthday?
My birthday is October 13th.
Oh, Lordy.
Coming up. Oh, it's next.
That's soon.
Next Wednesday. And it's a very busy, midweek work day for me, but I have a few little plans before it that I'm looking forward to, and I can't believe it, Chris. I'm gonna be 35. 35.
Yeah, you know what?
You're like, that's fine.
Where's my little tiny violin?
Tiny little violin. I know how much you pity my my aging. But I mean, Chris, it's kind of a crazy thing because I was quite young when I came straight out of college.
You were just a whippersnapper. You were like wet behind your ears.
Very.
You were just so innocent.
Tiny little baby. It's been more than 10 years now since we both graduated. So it was a few more years when I started, which is wild. It is just wild. And it is one of the things I treasure most, the fact that I, still have this community, enduring through my life, and my friendship with you, Chris. Oh,
I know it's
precious thing.
it endures.
It endures indeed. Hey, we got Anne McClellan Lardis. She said, I found you. And then I remembered to turn the sound on. Here you are, Anne. Welcome.
That was a big mistake, Anne.
Oh, well, it is 8:00, and we need to officially welcome all of you to FUMFA 68. Tonight we have with us Jessica Tumeo, a FUMFA alum. We are so excited to welcome her. And we have a special guest poet, Chris Abbate, and we just can't wait to hear from both of them. So you know that we have an hour of reading. So we have Chris up first, and then Jess at 8:30, and you have to stick around for the Q&A, and you got to share your questions. These are incredible people, incredible writers, and you are definitely gonna want to ask them some questions and hear about their amazing lives and experiences. Chris, tell us what's coming up in the upcoming weeks, though.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Next week we've got Heather Frimmer, who has a brand new novel out, and so that's going to be great. And we have Moro Dowdle, another poet, and Chris, our guest tonight, and Moro, and then a future poet down the road, Owen Elphick. I sort of met. I didn't really meet them, but we were all part of an online reading over the summer from a literary magazine that now, as Chris is going to have to remind me, it's God. The name of it is just too much seltzer. Too much seltzer.
Too much seltzer, Chris. Jeez.
It's gone straight to my brain.
Too
anyway.
No, I'm just kidding.
Anyway, no, it'll come back to me. And anyway, we all participated in the same reading, and they were awesome. So I invited them on here. And then the following week, the infamous open mic.
Woo!
And we have a tremendous lineup.
We do.
Our good friends, Philip J. Curtis,
woo!
Mr. Chance, and
yes.
And then just like a whole slew of folks who are some regulars and some other folks who are going to be reading on that. And in fact, I don't know, do we have any space left?
If you would really love to read in our open mic on October 17th, send us a message. We'll try to squeeze you in. We have a tremendous lineup. And Midnight just came in on the chat here. Hello. He will be a feature, an open mic feature with Chance. So we're so excited to have them back on screen with us. They're always, so awesome in our audience, and we've been excited to welcome them back. They've read with us before. They're our dear friends.
Oh,
yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
That's gonna be great. So let me just tell you also. Then the week after that, we got Ray Jane,
yes,
returning veteran, and Owen Elphick, whom I mentioned previously. And then on Halloween night, we have Spooky Night open mic. So if anybody has a spooky story, a spooky poem, a spooky essay, for even maybe somebody had like a spooky experience that they want to write about,
please do.
Please get in touch.
That is still open, so you should get in touch with us. We reached out to some people who already mentioned that on the survey, but please tell us.
And it's costume night as well, so you're gonna
it's Halloween. You got to show up in costume. You have to. Got to have fun. All right. Well, without further ado, it is time to get into our readings for tonight. Just to remind you, we have with us Jessica Tumeo and Chris Abbate, and we are going to bring up right now Chris Abbate. All right. Welcome, Chris.
There he is.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. All right. Let me introduce you with your bio. Chris Abbate's poems have appeared in numerous journals, including Connecticut River Review, Cider Press Review, and Comstock Review. He has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and a Best of the Net Award and has received awards in the Nazim Hikmet and North Carolina Poetry Society poetry contests. His first book of poetry, Talk About God, was published by Main Street Rag. His second book, Words for Flying, is forthcoming from Future Cycle Press. Awesome. We are so excited to hear you read, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Katie. I'm honored to be here. I'm so happy to see you guys finally after watching your past FUMFA poetry and fiction reading series. So it's great to be here. I learned that FUMFA is ranked #2 for low residency MFA programs in the country. So I thought I need to up my game after I read that. So I was really happy to see that. And congratulations to you guys. And also thank you for organizing this. Nothing really happens without organizers. So what you guys do just behind the scenes and setting this up is incredible. So thank you so much for having me. I'll read poems from my first book here, Talk About God. This was published by Main Street Rag out of Charlotte a few years ago. And I've been writing poetry more seriously for about 10 or 15 years now. And when I started writing poetry more seriously, I wrote a lot about my experiences. So all of my poems are free verse. Most of them are in a narrative style. Most of them are experiential. They're less conceptual. I like telling stories, and I like telling stories through poetry. It seems like just natural to me. The poems are also coming of age. So I ordered this book starting with the day my parents met, which is the very beginning. And then it kind of follows through with my growing up into young adulthood, and then ends with kind of like me in young adulthood. So if you do order the book, which I hope you will, from Main Street Rag or my website, start at the beginning and then follow through to the end. And I think you'll kind of see the progression of me and of the poems that way. The other theme I talk about here and Talk About God is my religious upbringing. So I grew up Catholic and evangelical. And when I started writing poetry, that was the other thing that kept coming up, these themes of what these religious ideas meant, kind of pulling back the curtain on religion and kind of seeing the truths behind the dogma. Because I was surrounded by it. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through high school. I went to a Christian college. So I was really swimming in this religious language. And poetry was a great way for me to reconcile some of these ideas and to kind of dig into my religious upbringing. So the first poem I'll read is about my dad. And back in the day before plastic ketchup bottles, squeeze bottles, there were glass bottles. So when a bottle of ketchup was almost finished, my dad would balance it on top of a new bottle of ketchup to get that last slug of ketchup out of the old bottle. And this poem is called Two Bottles. Did we consider how much depended upon two glass ketchup bottles, one on top of the other, mouth to mouth? My father's curiously deft hands, the knots of his knuckles pulling away from his architecture, this house of cards, and he in his furrowed work shirt, his chair with the cracked vinyl armrests, the quotation marks of our leftover pork chop bones fitted together on his plate, flecks of meat, and a final slug of ketchup he would not be denied. How very Catholic of us, not sinning by not wasting. All that we had, all that we would have, seemed to depend on those 2 bottles, our daily bread, the padding of our days, our rosary fingers, careful not to upset the balance of the kitchen table, Wednesday night, the fulcrum of the week, our half-finished labor, homework waiting in the den, a sitcom to watch, and Dad at the kitchen table waiting on gravity. Growing up, we had a basketball hoop in the backyard, and I played basketball all the time. I'm from central Connecticut, a town called Wethersfield. It's just south of Hartford. And so I do have deep ties to Connecticut. And I love playing basketball. And as long as there wasn't snow on the ground, I'd be out there playing. Up until like more recently when I dislocated this finger, and it was like over here, and 2 nurses had to put it back into place. I haven't played much since then. And this poem is about my mom. It's called Basketball Jesus. She'd watch me from the kitchen window playing backyard basketball. Her boy, all limbs, striped tube socks, gym shorts high above the knee. I was juking invisible defenders, counting down an imaginary clock to 0 before taking a turnaround jumper from the patio corner while drifting out of bounds. When I came inside for dinner, slick with sweat and a hunger my preteen body could hardly contain, she told me I would be a great player someday. Not just good, but great, which would have been fine, except my mother didn't know the first thing about basketball. I was rail thin, and I lacked the killer instinct Dad said I needed as he drove me home from games, one in which I had stolen the ball from an opponent and then, feeling badly, handing it back. You got to get in there and want it, he said. You got to grab that ball like it's a pepperoni pizza. After going nearly the entire season without scoring, Mom resorted to prayer. Before each remaining game, she'd call me up to her bedroom where she would open her Bible and read, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. All things being just scoring a basket, 2 lousy points. It wasn't much to ask, my mother willing this vessel of hers to push beyond himself, to break through the invisible force that seemed to be holding him back. So I imagined myself, a little Jesus, in a long beard and robe, dribbling circles around the other team, then taking flight like Dr. J or Clyde the Glide, soaring above their mystified faces, fulfilling my mother's prophecy of greatness, her unconditional faith in the only basketball player she knew, the only one who mattered. When I was visiting home once, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2006. I had lived in Massachusetts for a little while near Boston. And I'd come down to North Carolina. And when I went back to Connecticut to visit my mom, she was visiting her sister who was ill, who was dying, my aunt. And I went over with my mom for her when she visited my aunt. And I was able to witness this beautiful interaction that they had that was only possible by their shared faith. And I was kind of just observing it and watching this interaction that they had. And this poem is called Sisters Praying. If they knew the sun was a fleck of sand among beaches of stars, or that they were 2 blue raindrops in the ocean, one sister wouldn't be kneeling by the bed of the older sister on an August afternoon, helping her breathe through a Hail Mary she cradles in her hands. If they knew the earth was a speck of dust, that what they prayed to was wider than these walls, they wouldn't have carried each other these 70 years. They wouldn't have a name for God like dough rising in the kitchen. If they knew they had always lived in the center of the circle, that there was nothing to ask for, the older sister wouldn't be whispering into her bedsheets, telling the younger sister a secret about disappearing, about the light she would soon become, that she too is a fleck of sand. And I'll read one more poem from Talk About God. This poem is about my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, who from the south end of Hartford is where a lot of Italians immigrated from Italy in the early 1900s. My grandparents on both sides were part of that migration. And this is about my paternal grandfather, who owned a restaurant in the south end of Hartford. And it's funny how I like poems that are associative. So when I give poetry workshops, I will have the participants create a memory cloud, and we'll start with a core memory, and then we will branch off into associated memories. And I was talking with a friend recently about how in poetry, it's nice to be surprised, and how as poets, we surprise ourselves because we don't always know where a poem is going. And it's better almost not to know where a poem is going, to start and see where it takes you. And this was one of those poems. It's called Hartford, 1947. The Hartford Italians dropped spaces between words and syllables from their last names. After all, they were first-generation brand new Americans. Their slick black sideburns and tongues became invisible after midnight in the storage room of a South End restaurant, where they play pinochle and craps. How else to pay the cook and cute waitress to keep quiet? All while their ears danced their hands to Sinatra, until the night cops raided the joint and the Italians burned their betting slips, and my grandfather got caught with his on fire, his fingers in handcuffs. And when he got out of jail, he threw a party with champagne and Benson and Hedges in the house he won from a bet with his friend Carl, the guy he ate steak with Wednesday nights, the guy with blue eyes who once slipped me $10 for a kiss. So my next book is a full-length collection. It's called Words for Flying. It's going to be published by Future Cycle Press. I recently sent the final manuscript off to the editor. So it's in her hands, combing through and looking through every word and punctuation mark. And it's going to be published in early March. So I'm going to read some poems from that. Again, mostly first person experiential poems, some coming of age, still digging into my religious past. But when I looked through the manuscript and was ordering the poems, I realized a lot of poems are about manhood, kind of growing up, getting a little older. And it's also about the men who shaped me, but also about the women who shaped me. So there's kind of a nice little balance of the two. And I'm going to read some poems from that manuscript yet to be book. And this first poem is about just being in a neighborhood, buying a house, taking care of a yard, taking care of all the things that a house demands you take care of. And living kind of in these communities that are very close, where the houses are very close together, which is kind of the thing here with a lot of new construction, especially in North Carolina. And this poem is called Neighborhood Men. Neighborhood men talk in driveways, over the hoods of SUVs. They talk as if they need a piece of steel between them. They talk in cliches, spit consonants, curse like car engines starting. They stop their lawnmowers to talk, fold themselves over to pull a stray weed. They talk about the thing they just bought, how much they saved. They like to compare their stuff to your stuff, explain why you need the stuff they have. Neighborhood men talk like tools in the garage, potential energy. They talk about what they will do someday when they have the time. They talk about tomorrow or next week. They say we should to each other, as in going out for a beer or playing golf some Saturday. But until then, they will hang like shovels in perfect rows. They will be reliable and stiff. They will wake up, get dressed, and drive to work. And at the end of the day, they will pull into the driveway, go inside, turn on the news, and ponder the hard lines of houses and yards and sidewalks, the ones the neighborhood seemed to draw around them when they weren't paying attention. They will think of ways to bend the lines into a shape they can describe, the shape of diligence, of winches and chainsaws and trees they used to climb. One that resembles the question their wives are always asking, the shape of contentment, a thought that vanishes somewhere between the alarm clock and the shower, a shape they could fall in love with if only it had a name. So maybe a little bit more of a conceptual poem there, kind of branching away from experiential. But here's an experiential poem. It's my town of Holly Springs, North Carolina, sponsors a local authors book fair every year. And I'll usually go and hold a poetry workshop, and then they'll give us a table where we can sell our books. And I had stepped away from my table for a few minutes, and when I came back, my friend next to me said, "Someone just took a book of yours without paying." I said, "Oh, they'll probably come back. I'm sure they'll pay." Well, they never did, and I thought, what a perfect situation here for a poem. And there is an epilogue here to this poem from the former poet laureate of Connecticut, Leo Cannellin, who visited my class when I was at Southern Connecticut State University as a graduate student in the English program. And Leo told us that a poem is an anonymous gift to an anonymous audience. And this poem is called "To the Man Who Stole My Book at a Book Fair." What would you risk for poetry? Your clandestine hand, your slippery fingers? I wonder if you are more courageous for stealing than I am for writing, or if I should be flattered by your boldness. In Afghanistan, women write subversive two-line poems called landis, Pashto word for short, poisonous snake. An Afghan woman, Zarmina, burned herself alive after her brothers beat her for having written them. Perhaps the writing instructor who told me there is no such thing as an original idea was right. These poems were never mine to begin with. They are just thoughts that simmered while mowing the lawn or vacuuming, footprints from the back and forth of a day. Think of them as an arrangement of mental furniture, a room I have reserved for you to toss your worries over the back of a chair and to sit for an afternoon. Or think of them as a match cast to your presumptions. When your fingertips skim those pages, may you feel ever so slightly what it is to burn. I'll read a couple more poems here. I was at a poetry critique group. We were sitting outside of an old Borders or Barnes & Noble. No, I think it was a Barnes & Noble. And a boy and his father walked by. The boy was probably 5 years old or 6 years old. And he asked his father if it's fun to die. And we laughed and thought how interesting of a thing that is for a kid to say, to ask. And I've just had it sitting around for a long time, this title, Fun to Die. And I thought I would write a poem about it. Fun to die. As a toddler, my brother saved me from drowning in a bathtub. Another time, he pulled me back from an oncoming truck. In college, my friend fell asleep while driving. We went 60 into a guardrail, and the seatbelt cast a bruised rainbow across my chest. Today, as they pass me on the sidewalk, a boy asks his father if it is fun to die. He is walking ahead of his father, holding his hand, a tugboat towing a barge. I have heard that impermanence is the source of joy, but maybe there is some strange comfort in dying too. Life like an amusement park ride, stomach in the throat, squealing, and death, the letting go, finally, of the bright balloon we have been holding all day, and grinning as it rises, the hand relaxing again, because there is nothing left to carry. So I'll read one more poem. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you to Chris. Thank you to Katie and to Jess, co-reader. It's great to be here tonight. I really appreciate you having me and giving me this forum. So I mentioned I'm from Wethersfield, Connecticut. It's just south of Hartford. And Wethersfield is famous for its red onions. Back in the day when it was first settled, it was known for harvesting, growing great onions. And I do not like onions. I've never liked onions. And I thought, again, maybe a good topic for a poem. So this is called Onions. Onions, or whatever you detest, for no good reason. Something inconsequential, like red roses or crows, regardless of what others say. There's onion in everything, Dad would chide. And my mother, you can't even taste onions. You're Italian American, a friend once said. They love onions. More recently, I have come to adore dogs, the pause of Sunday evening, even a day of good rain. Someday, I may love onions the way I love cilantro, or reading the first page of a novel. But what if what we love is inbred, a matter of geometry? one shape over another, like the angle of jawline, proof of cheekbone, ratio of eyes to nose to lips. How else do I explain the way I give myself to something? How I fall face first into it, headlong to the point of ingestion, to the point of such inexplicable communion. Thank you.
Wow! Yes! Powerful, poignant, beautiful lyrical poems read with such a fabulous pacing and such a just a warm and wonderful voice. I could listen to you forever, like ever and ever. And I loved these dwelling in these stories and in these moments and hearing how it all fit together. We were on a journey just now, Chris Belden.
I know. I loved it. We began with ketchup and ended with onions, and somehow it just now I'm really hungry for onion rings.
Ooh.
Ketchup and a glass bottle.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You know, that's so funny because my father didn't do that so much, but I used to do that with the ketchup bottles. It was always a very very semi-dangerous activity, but
right.
It is.
When it worked, it was beautiful.
Not to move the table.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you. It's just absolutely fabulous reading. And everybody, you got to stick around, right? Because not only do we have Jessica Tumeo next, but we will have a Q&A with Chris Abbate and Jessica Tumeo starting around 9. So you need to save your questions for Chris for then. Chris, we just so enjoyed your reading.
Great. We could talk about that. 12 years of Catholic school right here too, my friend. So we'll
yes.
And a lot of experience in the evangelical church over here. A lot of resonance in what you are sharing.
All right.
Love it. All right,
Thank you.
Chris, we will see you later. And now we are going to bring up Jessica Tumeo. Hey, Jess. Oh, sorry. With that fabulous cup that we were talking about before.
Right.
Hey, guys.
Wonderful. Hello, Jessica. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
Great.
Doing great
Really
so far.
Thrilled to have you with us. And, you know, that was just such a fabulous reading by Chris Abbate. And we can't wait to hear from you. Chris, will you do the honors on Jessica's book?
I am absolutely privileged to do so. Jessica Tumeo received her MFA from where else? Fairfield University in 2018. Her short stories have been published in Sequestrum and the Oakland Review. One of her metafictional short stories, called Don't Look Up, was a runner-up in the 2018 Catherine Ann Porter Prize for Fiction from Nimrod. That's pretty cool. She's currently working on a metafictional novel, so we're going to have to ask about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was saying that.
I never metafiction I didn't like, but it's going to be good.
Awesome. All right.
Thank
Jess,
you.
we will leave
for the
you to
intro.
it.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm just going to get right to it. Hope you guys can hear me. Billy's cherry red Mini Cooper was only a week old, but a particular set of objects had already collected in her cup holders. A box of dried snacking crickets with bacon cheddar seasoning, a silver spoon she used for Greek yogurt a few days ago, and a folded scratch-off card that she still hadn't played. Most of the time, it seemed easier to linger between the best and worst case scenarios, and the rest of the time, she forgot the ticket was even there. Based on the flavored bugs, dirty spoon, and discarded scratch-off, the version of Billy you construct might be inaccurate or unflattering, but these are her possessions, introduced in the first sentence of the first paragraph of her story. You'd be right to assume that each must be important to the story in some way, or at the very least, contain some important fragment of herself. Billy pushed on to the 553 out of Grand Central with the Friday night crowd. She couldn't wait to get behind the wheel. She'd customized her car from top to bottom, 2 black stripes down the hood, a horizontal license plate, black and white checkered roof, and 17-inch wheels with black rims. The thought of it lifted her heart. Her twin brother Mark had words about it the other night. You shouldn't drive such an obvious car, he'd said. Obvious to who? She'd asked. Cops or weirdos, Bill? Their parents had left them the house in Connecticut and retired to a tasty condo in Florida, the color of orange sherbet. Billy was convinced that if she moved in with them, she'd have to cut her long hair, bleach it, spike it, and tuck it into a visor before morning walks around cul-de-sacs, carrying a soup can in each hand to tone her arms. For someone with strange road habits, Mark sure had strong opinions about cars. He drove their parents' old station wagon and never got on the road after dark. The other night, she came down for a snack and walked in on him playing that chaotic game where you can drive over medians and off cliffs and through buildings and into people. He drove his car straight down the road, the only car staying in its lane, stopping at every red light and using its turn signal. It made sense to her that he would play like that, but at the same time, it didn't. Because they were twins, Billy feared that she had whatever was going on with him going on inside her too, and that one day it would activate like a dormant virus exposed to the right conditions. Thinking about their relationship in those terms worried her. How about instead, she'd tell herself, their relationship was more like the one between two sides of a coin. When one side was face up and exposed, the other side remained hidden, and the two sides couldn't enjoy the same view at the same time, no matter how much they wanted to or how hard they tried. Her iPhone alarm beeped, snapping her out of it. She looked around the train. The windows were shiny and black, as if the car was submerged. She couldn't recall if the conductor punched tickets yet. She'd scheduled her phone alarm to ring 5 minutes before her station so she wouldn't sleep through the stop again. By the end of the day, she was more tired than a 22-year-old had the right to be. She was having recurring nightmares about being stalked. It was keeping her up at night. Just before she'd get kidnapped, she'd force herself awake, and she'd stay awake by blinking, going to pee, looking through the living room blinds for a golden window on her street. It was inconvenient. As someone who hated murder podcasts and serial killer documentaries, she didn't consider herself a prime candidate for this category of nightmare. Billy stood up from her seat and waited by the sliding doors. She deftly shifted her weight between her feet to accommodate the rocking train, which, on approaching her stop, always seemed to speed up when she thought it should be slowing down. The usual crowd gathered behind her. Tonight they buzzed about what happened earlier in Times Square. Billy couldn't believe it slipped her mind. A piano fell off a crane and killed someone on the sidewalk. She tilted an ear towards the chatter. Even when she had something to add to their nightly conversations, she never opened her mouth. Being on a first-name basis with her fellow commuters was something she consciously avoided. She would not become any more rooted in this routine. It was her belief at this stage of her life, with cold early mornings, long days in front of a screen, afternoon lulls, and drowsy commutes, was so fleeting that it was already over. The piano had fallen across the street from Billy's office. Something big and dark dropped past the window behind her laptop. Down on the street, a crowd formed around an indistinguishable heap. Shards of mahogany wood looked like oversized shaved chocolate bars on the pavement. Her coworkers had drifted back to their desks soon after the ambulance showed up. Billy remained perched at the windowsill, staring at the ground. It reminded her of a news story about a driver who died after a teenager dropped a frozen turkey off an overpass onto their car. For the rest of the afternoon, Billy was preoccupied with all the things that fall from the sky, from turkeys to pianos to people, and the infinite pockets of wrong places and wrong times she could pass through, and whether these pockets were as big as a sidewalk square or as small as a pinhead. Frank, the doorman in her building, had actually told her what happened. Every day he greeted her with an emphatic ciao. Most of the time she just said hello or goodbye back. But the rare time she responded in kind, he laughed and gave one perfectly loud clap that echoed through the lobby. Because of him, she regarded the Italian word as a greeting between passersby. There was no ciao for her tonight. When she came down from the office, he was outside smoking a cigarette. The man who died was his cousin. One of the nightly commuters, an older woman who wore patterned maxi dresses and chunky white sneakers with those thick, curved bottoms that toned your legs, addressed the group. As if the piano falling on this poor man wasn't enough, his 10-year-old daughter was kidnapped in the chaos. Are you kidding me? Isn't that almost too much? Almost. It's way too much, the woman with the short brown hair and thick-rimmed glasses said. One man dead, one girl missing, and from the same family. It's almost as if it were planned. I don't know, said the soft-spoken older man who always carried plastic shopping bags full of Tupperware. Things aligned just a little too perfectly today, if you know what I mean. He was a food dude's delivery man, right? Apparently, today was the company's take your daughter to work day. I remember those days. Tragic. I hope they find her. These guys are everywhere, watching young women, kids. Did you see the video? Billy was confused. It wasn't a delivery guy, she said, turning around, and there was no daughter. It was a doorman from the building across the street from mine. Everyone fell silent. The man with the Tupperware passed his crinkly bags from one hand to the other. No daughter? He asked. Did you see it? The woman asked. I was there, Billy said. On the sidewalk? The man asked. I saw it from my office window. What floor is your office? The 14th, so kind of high up. My doorman told me what happened. But you just said you saw it yourself, the woman asked. Billy couldn't believe she broke her own rule for this. The story about the daughter came from somewhere. Why would somebody make that up? The man asked. Girls are getting kidnapped in Times Square. Yes, I've heard of it happening right in Midtown, right in broad daylight. Are you saying that's not happening? Did you say the girl was on the bike with him or on her own bike next to him? To be fair, it seems impossible to hit a moving target with a falling piano. Too many variables. Well, unless your target is a doorman who stands in the same spot every day. But if a doorman died, then it wasn't a food dude's worker, unless he works 2 jobs. The daughter, though. Anyway, the woman with the sneakers spoke, her voice cut across the rest. It doesn't matter whether or not the guy had a daughter. The bigger point is that child sex trafficking is a problem, especially in big cities. I'm sure food dudes would be pleased if their company brought more awareness to it. Voices swelled. Billy turned back to the door and tuned them out. On one hand, Jimmy's cousin's memory was being perverted by a bunch of trained people. On the other hand, she knew it would happen next. Everyone will go home with their sneakers, glasses, and plastic bags, have dinner, mention the piano, seconds later move on to something else, watch a movie or show, go to sleep, and forget about it all by Monday. The train slowed to a stop. Its doors slid open, and Billy's reflection gave way to a rainy November night. Breathing the cold, damp air was like taking a drink of ice-cold water after a run. She bopped down the long flight of stairs, onto the main road, under the bridge, and to the big parking lot on the other side of the tracks. She easily found her black and white checkered roof among the black, maroon, gold, and gold sedans that blended into the night. She zigzagged through a row of cars and stopped. A man was leaning on her hood. "It's you," he said. I waited. "Move." She pressed her unlock button. White blue LED headlights flashed on. She'd never been on this end of them before, and their brightness hurt her eyes and reduced the man to a formless shadow. Squinting, she stepped towards him. "Excuse me." He pushed off the hood. "I just wanted to see what kind of person drove this kind of car." Billy looked back. People shuffled across the lot, eyes glued to the ground. They seemed so far away. "I'll come back another night. Easy to find." He pat the hood, stuck his hands in his pockets, and jingled his keys. Billy sped out of the lot. She drove until a red light stopped her down Main Street. She tried inhaling for 4 seconds, exhaling for 8, but kept losing count. She needed to get home. He might not have keyed her hood, but the rivets on his jeans could have scratched the paint. The light turned green. She stepped on the gas too hard. The car jerked forward. The back of her head bumped the headrest. She hated when that happened, the mark of a bad driver. Smooth and plush this morning, her steering wheel now felt sticky from her sweating palms. Gold headlights approached her from behind. She watched the rear view more than she watched the road. She put on her blinker. They put on their right blinker. She turned it off and stayed straight. They turned theirs off and did the same. The car followed her through the center of town. And 2 things dawned on her at once. First, she realized there was nowhere to hide this damn car. Her and Mark's garage was filled with junk their parents were too lazy to bring to Florida or the dump. If this guy were following her, and she was positive he was, then going home was not an option. 2, she realized this was the scenario from her nightmares. Either her recurring dreams had been premonitions or she was losing her mind. More accurately, she was losing the things inside her mind. This was somehow her fault. At some point, she accidentally gave her stalker the chance to wiggle up from the pink squishy coils of her brain and push his way into the real world. The more she thought about it, the crazier it sounded, but if she didn't think about it for long, it made sense. There was one other way to deal with this, convincing herself that she wasn't being followed at all. For the next minute, she cut down every escalating thought that tried to surface, told herself she was tired and being dramatic. Every single car on the road followed whoever was in front of them. That was how roads worked. Plus, her back windshield was wet from rain. Still, she wasn't comfortable going home. She turned towards the highway. The silver spoon rattled in her cup holder. A sharp turn onto the I-95 ramp threw her scratch card onto the passenger floor. She hadn't ripped down the highway in the Mini yet. She tried to make it a fun thing, a normal thing, to get onto the highway instead of going home. Mark was right. That black Sentra was a perfectly fine option for her, and it would have saved her thousands. For the first time in her life, she pressed the gas pedal to the floor. Surprisingly light and springy, it went down with little resistance. "Call Mark," she announced. After a pause, her brother answered the phone. "Mark, are you home?" "Yes, why?" "I feel like someone's following me." "Where?" "On 95. "Where are you going?" "Not sure." There was a pause. "Well, you know I can't come pick you up or anything," he said. "If you really think someone's following you, call the cops." She hung up. Was potentially being followed considered an emergency? She cruised from the left lane to the center lane to the right lane. The car behind her stayed close. She swerved back to the left lane without putting on her blinker, and the car behind her did the same. Snippets from those murder podcasts and documentaries that she accidentally encountered floated up. Details from the brief Wikipedia holes she jumped down, the paragraphs about victims and what happened to their bodies, all the bad ways stories ended for people who went against their gut. Billy watched her speedometer, odometer, and rear view. She shifted into the middle lane. It would give whoever was behind her the chance to scoot by, but they never did. 7 miles passed. "Call 911, she announced. "What's the address of your emergency?" Billy looked down the interstate. There were no signs, and she hadn't paid attention to the ones that already passed. She did her best to explain what was happening, and saying it aloud sounded dumb. The voice from her speaker told her to drive the speed limit and take the next exit. "And what kind of car did you say you were driving, ma'am?" She pushed the pedal to the floor again. The Mini shot forward. Boosted by the turbo engine, she approached 100 miles per hour. The steering wheel began to vibrate. That wasn't right. She took her foot off the gas, tapped the brake, and the car behind her pushed into her bumper. Her Mini went sideways. She felt weightless. A strange second of zero gravity, body lifted off seat and car lifted off road. She smashed into the divider, and I snapped out of it, as if waking from a dream. After a moment, I turn off my lamp, get up from my writing desk, and switch on the ceiling light. The brightness stings my eyes. Small pink and blue sparkles float across my line of vision. I blink until they're gone. Hello, reader. Sorry for the sharp change in tone. Obviously, that wasn't supposed to happen. Just give me 1 second. Let me quickly run through the story's plot points. I listed them right here. From the train ride to the station, nothing really happens plot-wise. Most of the story so far has passed in her head. Do I spoil it for you? It's not exactly spoiling it, but how about this? Pretend the inside information I'm about to give you is your refund for a story that went wrong. All right. Billy was never supposed to encounter that man in the parking lot. In all of my notes and plotting, he didn't exist. Surprises are part of writing, but this surprise felt intrusive. You might wonder why I didn't interfere. I couldn't. Authors aren't supposed to do that. We're supposed to observe and tell the truth. So honestly, whoever rear-ended Billy also knocked me clean out of my story. This has never happened before. I reread the last few pages and start from the top. No clues or hints, no idea how this happened. I check the time and close my laptop. Can you stick around? The 11 o'clock news is starting soon, and I've been conducting some nightly research. I pace the perimeter of my living room, pausing here and there to pull my heel up to my butt and stretch my quad muscles. My legs ache at night. It's the restlessness. I check the peephole in my front door, see a bright white circle of sterile hallway light. Double check the chain on the door. Locked. Undo the chain, remembering Adam. I keep forgetting I don't live alone anymore. Adam and I have been dating for about 2 months, and normally I wouldn't have a boyfriend move in so soon, but last week, someone ripped off his door, toppled his fridge, and emptied his drawers and closets. They didn't find anything related to his investigation, but he keeps that stuff in an underground office. He thinks they'll be back. Letting him move in is a risk. Personally, I have nothing to hide. When the 8 o'clock curfew rolls around, I'm home in my pajamas eating takeout. From my living room window, the black and blue street looks empty. Not a single cab or car. No one's around anymore. Since the National Content Panel took over 2 months ago, the city has sprung a leak. My 11 o'clock ritual is simple. I rinse out the mocha pot, fill the lower half with filtered water, and drop a scoop of classic roast ground espresso into the filter basket. I screw the pot back together and set it over a low flame. While it heats up, I peel an inch of lemon rind and place it in a small white cup. When the pot hisses, I pour the espresso over the rind, set it on the coffee table, grab my notebook and pen, and turn on the TV. Fox. The first story is about an acrobat in Vegas who died during a show. The footage is grainy and shaky, apparently shot on someone's cell phone inside of a dark theater. I number the top of my page. Cirque du Soleil, acrobat death, amateur footage. That's important. On top of a platform high above the audience, a pale human-shaped figure stands completely still. In a blink, the figure plummets, a beige smear against the black theater. The video replays 5, 6, 7 times. I lose count. One anchor repeatedly assures us that OSHA is investigating the death. I keep watching the acrobat fall, again and again. It reminds me of something I read a while ago that may or may not be true. That children watch the same movies and shows again and again because there's comfort in knowing what comes next. I think of the audience, a skyline of silhouetted heads and ears and necks and shoulders. This is probably the last Cirque show they'll see. Before Netflix was taken offline, I'd watched a documentary about the Challenger. Someone worthy of a title card said it would be cathartic for Krista's kids in her school gymnasium or that busload of Girl Scouts from South Carolina who watched the Challenger explode to watch Endeavour take off successfully. I never finished the documentary, but from what I'd seen, I don't think anyone confirmed this with her students. Next channel, NBC. They're doing their version of the acrobat story with the same exact footage. At this point, I've stopped feeling bad for the acrobat. No, that's not true. Grafe is still here somewhere. It's just turned too many corners for me to see clearly. I flip through the other channels. The acrobat keeps falling. I go back to Fox and NBC. Both have moved on to discussing the re-release of an old movie. It's not news. I give up on taking notes. Weeks of research, and I still haven't found a clear pattern for which stories are approved by the content panel. You're here for the fiction, but you're also my guest, and I feel that I owe you context about my world and why I'm writing in the first place. 5 months ago, the National Content Panel was instated to fact-check every story that gets published, from daily news to novels. It's made up of experts in major areas like world languages, history, anthropology, chemistry, medicine, and agriculture, but also the niche topics like wig making, cheese making, and poker. The problem is, the panel has too many story submissions to verify and not enough experts working around the clock. They blocked the internet the day they took over and released a statement claiming the outage would be temporary and stop the spread of misinformation and malware while they got on their feet. That night, the fires started. A lot of people didn't believe them. Restrictions on social media and search engine results are tightest. Podcasts are mostly old ghost stories or sports history talk shows. Radio stations only play jazz. I am no censorist, but I don't mind the music. The panel allows news agencies to publish 5 approved stories a day. My theory is that each agency wants to tell us more about what's going on and selects 5 specific stories from the pile that, when viewed from afar, communicate something greater, more cohesive, and of more consequence. But so far, every night, it's just a mix of the same stories from different mouths. Worse yet, I discovered that a few stories are actually weeks old. I have no idea when the acrobat fell. The only conclusion I can draw with certainty is that now and then, some things happen. According to my sources, the panel will let publishers put out literature again soon. It'll be hard to get anything approved. Nonfiction demands the grounds be excavated, the artifacts examined, dated, registered, authenticated, documented. If I try to tell you what life is like today from a nonfiction perspective, this story will be doubted until nothing is left. In a fictional story, though, I can bury something and never have to dig it up, as long as I bury it properly. Billy's story is supposed to be about falling pianos, rumors, and people on the train. I turn off the TV and put away my notebook. She's not the woman who hooks you in the first chapter or episode of a series, only to never be seen alive again. Let's rewind to the point when she steps off the train. Reader, you and I just said hello, but now it's time for ciao, a short greeting and goodbye between passersby. Thank you.
Whoa, Jess.
Man,
Awesome. Wow. That was, Chris, wasn't that awesome?
But, yeah, I'm just like, it's like, where's this going? You know, it's like, I want to find out.
Freaky meta thing going on. I just want to keep going.
Thank you.
That is so cool, Jessica. I already have 2 questions lined up in my mind that I want to ask during the Q&A. Awesome stuff.
Oh,
I'm really hooked. There's this, it's very powerful, and we're observing and learning all of these very interesting things but it's also like super eerie at the same time. There are like these little aspects that make it very suspenseful, and I'm just hooked.
Thank you.
I am too. I'm hooked in both levels so far, and I don't know where it's going. The people listening here, these comments are coming in.
Oh God.
There's just like so many
Loving
people are just having such a great time tonight. Great writing, loved it, truly incredible, great job.
Yeah.
Bravo.
You'll have to, just like Chris Abbate, you'll have to go onto Facebook Live, just our Facebook page, and also to YouTube, and take a look at all of the comments and the love for both of you. Well,
sure.
It is Q&A time, Chris. Let's bring Chris Abbate back up here.
Good.
And let's give both of these amazing writers another round of applause. Chris Abbate, Jessica Tumeo, you guys were both absolutely incredible. And Chris, might I observe that, we always... I might. Thank you. We put thought obviously into who we are pairing together, but beyond what we could possibly predict, there always ends up being some kind of, thematic synergy, like a serendipitous thematic connection. And I think what is kind of cool here is that we have 2 different genres, 2 very different kinds of approaches here, but we're kind of focusing on observing these stories, these lives, these narratives kind of at these different levels. And I feel like I've seen these like characters and these situations, observations about those situations, and that is very exciting to me. Quite a richness this evening.
It is exciting to me, because also, built into Jess's, and this is your novel, Jess. I'm assuming that is the idea of the writer and the story, right? And then you kind of lose track of the actual writer who's Jess, right? You're just like, and then Chris's poems always had this beautiful framing device, which was just Chris talking about the poem, right? Yeah. So in a sense, we had the writer say, okay, now I'm going to tell you this story about this, oh gentle reader, right? It's like that kind of voice, which
is good.
Yeah, it really works well, and you lose out on that if you're reading the actual book of poems. Not that people should not read.
People need to buy these books when they.
This is what makes a reading so cool is that particularly with poetry, because you read a bunch of poems and you get to hear the author, the poet, talk about the poems in between.
And that's the treat of coming to a live reading, or a live reading live stream like ours. Is that it is a really special thing to hear it straight from the author and hear all of their comments about it, especially now during this Q&A time. You don't get that with just the book, although you all need to buy all of the publications that these 2 are featured in, obviously. Okay. But we debuted a new first question about 2 weeks ago, and it has brought us some really fabulous and wonderful answers. Chris, will you take it away with our new first question? And while the audience is putting their questions in the chat, please.
That's right. Please do so.
Yes, yes.
Right. It's a very basic question, but it's one that was asked of me once by somebody, and it threw me for a loop. So I like to throw people for a loop because it's so basic and it's something we don't necessarily think about. But how has writing changed your life? If so, how has writing changed your life? Chris Abbate.
What a question that is.
I know.
How much time do we have?
Take your time, Chris A.
It's taken up a lot of time. And so when you're doing it, you're like, why am I wasting time? Is anyone hearing
What
this?
the hell am I doing? Yes.
What am I doing? I could be doing other things. But I can't imagine, when I'm doing it, I can't imagine doing anything else. When I finished the manuscript for this Words for Flying, I didn't write for a while. I just was like, why am I writing at all? So how's it changed my life? It's synthesized so many things. It has saved my life, and it can save anyone's. If you can talk, there's a book, a well-known book called If You Can Talk, You Can Write. And it's a synthesis of how you feel with words, and you can write about yourself, something that most of us hopefully know, on a deep level, and you can reconcile feelings.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So I was able to take all of these ideas and things that I had thought for so long. And I used to call these things, when I was growing up, I had these things called thinkers. I'm like, oh, I just had a thinker. And this was when I was really young too. And I was, 10, a teenager. And I thought I just had a thinker. And this is what all these poems are.
Yes.
They're thinkers. They are a way for me to capture the essence of a feeling. And especially when it comes to religious truths. I mean, I grew up in a religious environment, so there was a lot of deep stuff going on.
Totally.
And poetry and writing allowed me to capture the essence of it and come to terms with it and understand it.
And like you said, synthesize it and have these associations and understand, it better through the writing and through, kind of just that process of thought, being in that flow. I love that, Chris. Yes.
And to be fair to it and to balance it.
Yes.
And to not just criticize it, not just to be cynical, but to be true to the feeling and to understand it from different perspectives.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. Awesome.
Jessica? Great answer.
Fabulous answer. It totally resonates.
Yes. What do you say? How has writing changed your life?
I would say it's made me a little more observant, a little more articulate, maybe. It's helped me remember things just because, I'm writing a lot down, and helped me, appreciate those memories.
Awesome.
You know what? I mean, I don't think you can be a writer without being observant in it. And it's like anything else that you have to, it's like a sport or something. You have to practice, right? And be able to see more and more. It's like, I don't know, you have to be able to see the curveball coming at you, if you're a baseball player. I couldn't see a curveball coming at me if I stood up there, in front of a major league pitcher. But those guys can, because they've been practicing for years and years. Same thing.
And I love the, even though you have these meta layers and these moments of transition, your writing is so lyrical, and it's hard to imagine these transitions and what you're moving into as necessarily plotted out, like you even said in your, in what you shared with us, because it flowed so smoothly and almost in an associative way, kind of like what Chris Abbate was saying. And I just love that, for me, I'm only a poet. I haven't yet, I should say, done fiction or nonfiction. That's over here for me. But I really love it when I'm listening to fiction, and I feel that kind of flow and how it feels associative, like the way you would work on a poem. And I absolutely love that. And I can see how that also comes from observation and letting yourself kind of go into these different moments and modes, and dying to hear more about about metafiction, but we do have questions coming in, so I will hold my question. I will hold my horses on that question. Chris, which question should we grab first over here?
Well, I don't know what. Let's do Susan's first, just because it's a I think it's a simple
Yes.
and short one, just for Jessica from Susan M. Davis. Are you finished with your book? If not, how much more is needed?
Susan needs to know. She was asking.
She needs to know. She's out there in California just
Hi,
itching.
Susan.
Yes. Hi, Susan. Thank you for your question. No, I'm not finished with my book. I'm in probably the final third of it. I started writing it last year. I would say I've got like a third left to go. So I don't know how it ends. So Chris, you were saying you're interested to see, where it goes, and I am too.
Ooh.
That's a
Me
good
three.
spot. We will talk about that because, I mean, there are two schools of thought on that for, particularly for novelists. Like, should you know how it ends? I heard Joyce Carol Oates once interviewed on the radio, and I almost drove off the road because I was driving, and she said, every writer should know how the book ends. I thought, that's crazy.
No, Joyce. I disagree.
Crazy. I mean, some people, sure, that's how they write. That's apparently how she writes. I mean, she writes, 10 books a year, but, I don't get it. Not for me.
I don't think that needs to be a prescriptive rule.
I don't think so either. She was adamant about it, and I thought, wow, I'm glad I didn't go to Princeton.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And who knows, you would have a book where you know how it ends, and then the next one you don't. It's all about being flexible.
True.
Yeah. Sometimes you do know how it ends, and that's okay. But it's just like it's not a rule. Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
I know you have some questions.
We do. I'm wondering if this question about inspiration, we can kind of put that to both of our writers. So this question is directed at Jessica. What inspired your story? But I would like to, while Jessica is thinking about that, Chris Abbate, I would love to ask you, what inspired you to focus on, as you said, kind of from your parents' meeting through coming of age? What made you want to specifically focus on that, and also the religious aspect? Was that something that emerged as you were writing many poems and looking towards a collection, and you were like, that's what's happening here, and that's what I'm going to push to pursue? Or was it an intention from the outset, so an inspiration, a source of inspiration that was already there?
Yeah, never was planned. Just what came out. I find I like the things I like to read, the poetry I like to read, the movies I like to watch. They're about real life.
Yes.
So they're just basic stuff, like the Seinfeld of poetry, right?
Yeah.
It's like a show about nothing. So that's really what I think drives me, is just to be able to communicate in ways that I can't do verbally. In poetry is a perfect avenue for that, because you can have clip sentences. You don't even need to be grammatically correct. Really
non-linear.
I mean, you make line breaks. It's great. So it gives you this freedom to express these feelings that you have. So as far as inspiration, I mean, just for me, it's just family, all these influences I've had, and just kind of trying to understand the scope of your life and how short it is and how fleeting things can be, and that we can capture. And if there's any opportunity I have to capture just a memory, like the fun to die, but memories of having my life saved and surviving a car crash. When I do it, and then when I can put it in the book too, in this book and the next book, I'm like, all right, I've done it. I've captured that feeling. Now on to the next one. I have about 500 drafts that are waiting to. I'm not going to get to all of them. I do not have time to get to all of them. I don't have. I wouldn't even live that long.
I wish that you would.
But I pick and choose. Now I can pick and choose the ones I want. And so if I sit down, I may have a new poem to write, or I can just choose from these hundreds of fragments and ideas. And what I do is I just in my Windows folder of drafts, I'll just type out a title. Sometimes I'll type out a title and a few lines, and then I'll just go back to it and just kind of pick up on it and see if I'm inspired to write about it. And if there's something there where I can capture that feeling in a poem, I'm not just going to capture the feeling. It's got to have some dimension to it.
Yes.
There has to be more to it. And those are the ones that actually make, the final cut of a book. But once I start working on it, though, it's I give it everything I have, and I make sure I've dug down as far as I can go, and I've given it my all. And I know that when someone reads it, I feel like they're going to, it's going to resonate with them.
You've really been able to crystallize that exactly, like to honor the feeling and what it meant to you, and the resonance that it had. And I so get what you're saying, Chris, and that it's such a satisfying process. It takes a lot of work and a very long time, but I totally get that. And it absolutely comes through in your poems.
Thanks.
So awesome.
Yeah, honoring the feeling. Yep. That's the perfect way of saying it. That's what you are doing, and honoring all the people who've influenced you. And that's really what it's about for me.
Totally. Thank you so much, Chris. Jess, on this exact question about inspiration. So for this particular story, what inspired this story?
I had been writing a lot of short stories that had nothing to do with each other, but I'd written them all in kind of the same time frame. And so they were all about different things, but I felt like they were kind of all about the same thing just because I had written them around the same time. Yeah. So there was that. And then I also had just been thinking a lot about content and how much content we're assaulted with on a daily basis. If you use the internet, if you turn on the TV, the news is constant. Instagram, Instagram and Facebook are constantly, refreshing their homepages for you to, stick around and keep scrolling. Your phones are constantly sending you notifications. So I was just thinking about, and especially during the pandemic, because a lot of people were inside and on their devices.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking a lot about the effects that assault has on the minds and the imagination of the reader and also the writer.
Yes. That's fascinating. And I kind of hear a bit of that in what you were reading to us, when the censors only choose 5 stories a day, and how that's weirdly almost appealing. I could handle maybe 5 stories, but sanitized creepily by some various group somewhere. That's not great. But I get that. That's quite a little thing. That almost gives me a little bit of a thinker, like you were saying, Chris Abbate, where I'm just yes, well, how could the flow of information be more digestible, but not in a creepy sort of dystopian way.
So
that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Chris B.
No, but just that's the inspiration for kind of the framing story of your story. But and then there's the story within it.
Ooh.
With this. I mean, I'm fascinated by this falling piano. I love any kind of weird, horrible, New York story like that. I'm thinking as I'm listening, say, wow, did that really happen? Did just I just love this image of a piano just going by your 14th floor window.
Ooh.
Yeah, that didn't.
That's awesome. That's like Fellini.
Yes, I actually watched 8.5 while I was writing this. I feel like I watched it a few times just because I'm obsessed with that movie. But yeah, no, that piano falling didn't happen, but it could, but at the same time, it's also so cartoonish. So that's why I liked that image.
Right. Yes, that too. Because we're concerned, but we're also this cartoony, and there's almost a little bit of humor with the, food dudes,
It's Roadrunner, but but somewhere a piano has fallen, and I don't know if it landed on a doormat. Could have.
That would be an interesting statistic. How many pianos have
How many
fallen?
people have been killed by falling pianos?
Oh,
If anybody out there knows the answer to that question, please put it in the chat.
Oh my goodness! All right, Chris, which question should we choose next here? We got it. We got a few good ones.
Gosh,
A few good ones.
Wait,
Okay, well, why don't we give this question to Chris? Chris talked about this a little bit already, but people have seized upon your vocab word here, a thinker, and your meaning of it. What's your process for taking a thinker and transforming it into a complete poem? So you specifically mentioned that story, for example, with the that you overheard, like, is it fun to die? And then you kind of pulled that out years later and were like, now is the time. How did that happen?
You have to be, thank you, Amber. You have to be willing to let the thought just sit and simmer. It's like making a good soup or sauce.
Marinate, percolate.
You have to let it. Yeah, you have to have patience. So it's a long-term thing. I mean, there are some poems that will just, kind of come right away, and I'll just write them. But I do not trust that instinct, because usually they come off as being too romantic.
Yep.
A little sappy, a little syrupy. So I need to just let it sit. I put it away. Like this Fun to Die thing. That happened about 10 years ago. Maybe 8
there you go.
It was a long time ago. So I'll just, like I wrote about in the Man Who Stole My Book at a book fair.
Yes.
They're just thoughts that come to me while vacuuming. Anything where I'm going in straight in lines back and forth.
Ooh.
Somehow it's something to do with the mind. It just kind of gets into a pattern where if you know where you're going, the mind can just kind of be free. So if you have if you have those parameters, you can just kind of let the mind just kind of these ideas come.
Be in this flow state where you're not editing yourself all the time and directing things too much.
Yeah. Yes. You do. You just need to just let it go. The other thing is I read a lot. I read a lot more than I write.
Yeah.
That's something else that helps. It's like, so that I can take a thinker and I can give it shape with. Really, I'm looking for a tone. I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for a way in, a doorway, right? Yep. And there are many doorways into a poem, and I need to choose. I'm trying to find the right one. And then I'm looking for a tone. I want to be able to read it. There are some poems I cannot read, or they just don't come out really very good. They're difficult to read. They're clunky. But most of my poems I can read, and I really enjoy reading them. Like for this, I spent hours trying to figure out like which poems to read for this reading. And I've done lots of readings before, and every one I kind of agonize over, like what should I read? What's going to sound good? So I'm looking for a tone too. So I don't know. I mean, really, to figure out how it happens, I do not know. I mean, I look back at some of the things I've written, and I think a lot of us do. We're like, who wrote that?
Yeah.
It's like another person.
Everything that you're saying resonates.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like another person. So really, I think it's about just letting it sit and reading and listening to people read as well. That's really important. Lately, I've been listening to Mark Doty. Like before I read tonight, I listened to Mark Doty. I really like the way he reads. I love his voice and his style and his tone. So that helps me too. And then I find that doorway into a poem too. I know it's been sitting around, and I got it. I have the idea.
Nice.
Such great insight, Chris. And that all of that so resonates with me in my various poetry practices and ways things happen for me. And it's awesome to hear you say it and to put it like so perfectly. Thank you. That was awesome. Chris, I bet you we can maybe grab this one last question for Jess before we maybe get into our.
I think so. If it's the same one that I'm thinking.
That's the exact one I was thinking. Sorry if you missed
Rachel Lauren Bean. Jess, what do you find is the most difficult part of writing the meta aspect of your novel?
I wanted to ask about the meta-ness.
Well, tough one, Rachel Bean. Hi, Rachel. Thanks for being here. The toughest thing about writing meta is probably you have to keep in mind, like, and I don't try to do this when I write fiction, but since it's metafiction, I have to think like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I writing metafiction? Like, what does this extra layer bring to the story? And yeah, I would say that's the toughest thing, and just not like justifying writing the meta aspect, but kind of like, well, what are you saying about reading and writing, and like, why do you have to do this? Yeah, I would say that's probably the toughest. Yeah, that's a good question though. I would probably have a better answer if I thought more about it.
Well, do you think that's dangerous to think about it? Sometimes I wonder. It's like, like you just do it, or do you think about doing it? Does that kind of ruin the doing it part?
Well, that's a good point. I think in the editing process, it's important to think about, but maybe not when you're writing it. Like in the editing process, it's important to consider that. But when I'm writing it, I do just try to write, but you can't help but like overthink or just think.
Right.
True.
Well, I think I would think a difficult part of writing something like this is that, once you break that wall, you break that wall, right? And you address the reader, and you that territory, it becomes more overtly philosophical. It's like, oh, okay, this is not just a story that you're reading and you're following this character, and you're, you have the suspension of disbelief and all that stuff. And, I was there. I was like, oh my God, this woman in the car, and and you're doing that. You're pulling those strings really well, and then boom, you break it. It's like, oh, okay, there's like a real philosophical thing going on there now, and that was daunting as a writer. I would think.
Yeah, it is, but that's just like what the story is about. So but it is daunting.
But it's thrilling to read and very exciting. Like, I'm sure that so much work is going into this, but just kind of like getting into that world and then being pulled out of it to this next level was like, oh, I think the thrill is, part of the fun, and is what's going to keep you going and keep us like, pushing you to keep going.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
I tried writing fiction before poetry, and it's hard.
That's
why I write poetry, because it was easier. If you haven't wrote a bad poem, you can just kind of put it aside.
Well, you are also absolutely a poet, Chris.
Sure, you're a poet, but you're also, you're writing these narrative poems, and to refer again to our friend Charles Rafferty, who, weeks ago, right? Where that line is very blurry, right? You tell the story of the guy who stole the book, right? I mean, that's a story. Mm-hmm. You tell it in a certain way that poetic, but that's a story. it's a really good story.
Quoting Charles Rafferty when he said that he really kind of sees no difference between his flash fiction and his prose poetry, and we were like, absolutely yes. And that was after he just read all of these incredible flash fiction and/or prose poetry pieces, and we couldn't tell the difference. We just knew that it was great stuff.
And right now I'm reading Ocean Vuong, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Ocean Vuong's a poet, but it's a narrative memoir, but it's very poetic. So it's really just beautiful and very deep.
So good. So good. All right. Well, we do need to get to our famous last question, Chris Belden.
Yes, we do. And thanks. We had a lot of great questions tonight.
We really did.
Our viewers, which sometimes they're shy. They sit back, they're in the back of the class avoiding eye contact and all that. And tonight they jumped right in.
There were even maybe two or three we didn't get to. So thank you very much.
Right. So yes, our final question is the Pearl of Wisdom portion of the evening, which we ask you for a bit of advice for our young, aspiring, emerging, don't have to be young, middle-aged, older, who knows, writers out there, just looking for some advice.
Yeah.
And then to go with that, a book recommendation. We've already had, at least one book, sort of book recommendation there, the Ocean Vuong book. But anyway, so Pearl of Wisdom and a book recommendation. Chris Abbate, take it away.
Pearl of Wisdom for young people or for people who are starting to write?
Emerging writers of any age.
Any writer who just needs some advice,
Yeah. So for poetry, I think it's important to have someone else. If you're serious about publishing, which I was, I do not write for fun. I write to publish. Everything I write is pretty much something I plan to publish. So I show everything I write to at least one person, someone who's better than me. I have been in critique groups for years. I ran a critique group up in Massachusetts for 6 years. I have learned how to give people feedback and positive criticism. And I've received that too. So that's really key, is to get with people who are just a little bit better than you and to learn how to give and to take feedback on your work. Go to open mics, read out loud, read to yourself, read to your dog, read to your cat, and then just get out there to open mics. And then you'll hear yourself too, which is really very helpful. Right. Books. Okay. What do I have? Billy Collins' Picnic Lightning.
Yes.
Is probably one of my favorite books of poetry. There are tons and tons. I have too many, but that's one that I would recommend to everybody. Right. Mary Oliver.
Yes.
First 2 volumes of poetry, her anthologies of poetry, volume 1 or volume 2. They're awesome.
Yeah, and you know what, Chris? I can hear them. I could feel them in your style too. It's excellent recommendations and so good, and an excellent pearl of wisdom for sure. Thank you so much, Chris. And Jess, pearl of wisdom and a recommendation.
I agree with Chris about learning how to take feedback. I think that's really important. But I will say, I feel like it's also important to just write for fun. Like, don't worry about getting published. There are so many amazing authors who aren't recognized during their lifetime. So I totally think that you have to have fun while you're writing because you're spending a lot of time doing it. So yeah, and just go with it. Don't be afraid to write something unpolished or, just go for it. That's, I guess,
I like that. Just go for it. You have to, in order to get to these interesting places, have these associations, get into this flow. You have to just go for it. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's it. And my book recommendation, relevant to what I'm working on, would be If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino.
Your Calvino, huh?
Yeah.
That does make sense.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for those pearls of wisdom and those recommendations. And thank you so much once again to Chris Abbate and Jessica Tumeo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me. It's great to be with you, Jess, to read with you. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. So awesome to hear from both of you and to always get to, to chat at the end of the evening. So wonderful to get to know you better and to hear your thoughts on all of these questions. Thank you so much to our fabulous audience. We hope you enjoyed everything. Yay! Thank you for the questions and for all the wonderful comments. Both of you need to go and see all of the love and fabulous comments on Facebook, also on YouTube. Yeah, it was a fabulous evening. Chris, what do we have coming up? Who do we have coming up next Sunday night?
Next Sunday night, Heather Frimmer, Mauro Dowdle. Tune in. It's going to be another fantastic night.
It's going to be amazing.
Cool.
Thanks again, and good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Katie.